Hello there. This is Emily Muse, producer of Education Insights Focus on Behavior and the Behavior Education Connection. We are so glad you're here today. We have a great episode in store, but before we dive in, we do have a favor to ask. We would love your help in spreading the word about our podcast. So if you have enjoyed the content here, please feel free to share our shows and episodes with others who might enjoy them, and to make sure that you are subscribed and liking our episodes wherever you listen to podcasts. We can't say enough about how much of a difference that makes in helping us spread the word, and we appreciate your help. So, without any further ado, let's dive into today's episode.
Hello, and welcome to the Behavior Education Connection, the podcast that works to connect the world of behavior analysis and the world of education. We focus on topics important to behavior analysts who work in the public schools and those who support them. Join us and spend time gaining insights and ideas as our host talks with fellow behavior analysts as well as other experts in the field.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Behavior Education Connection. I'm your host, Dr. Selena Layden, and I am excited today to have Rose Griffin with me. Hi, Rose.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
I'm so glad you're here. Could you tell our audience a little bit about you?
Absolutely. I just wanted to say thank you so much for having me. I heard you talk at OHABA. I think it was 2019. I mentioned that, but
You're dating me a little bit, but yeah.
I'm a historian now. Okay. It's over 20 years in the field. So welcome to a history lesson. But I really enjoyed your talk. I didn't know who you were. I thought what you were doing was for your state was really awesome and inventive. And I love people that kind of see something that's maybe missing and build a solution for it. So kudos to you. I'm a speech therapist in BCBA. I started as a school-based SLP, and my second year, my position for school-based people, my position was RIFT my first year. So I knew the following year I was not going to have a school-based position, which devastated me. I thought I was going to get one job and work in it till I retired, and that wasn't the case, thank goodness. And I took a position at the Cleveland Clinic. They have a school called the Learner School, and it's a non-public program for autistic students, and it's students who have very, at the time, unsafe problem behavior that's a barrier to them accessing the general education setting or specialized setting in a public school. And so I learned all about applied behavior analysis in that position, and I loved it, helping students who were not having a device, did not use sign language, did not use pictures, but we were able to help them by putting speech therapy and ABA together. And that's really where my passion for learning everything that I could about ABA happened. And then I took a position in Austin, Texas at the Central Texas Autism Center, CTAC, and that is where I did all of my supervision to become a BCBA. And I've been dually certified for over 15 years now. So I've been in the game a long time, have seen all the changes, which has been exciting, disheartening, exciting, challenging, et cetera. But I love talking about bridging speech therapy and ABA. So I'm excited to chat about that today. And I started my own business called ABA Speech 8 years ago. And we started actually with a product called the Action Builder Cards. And now I have a podcast of my own with almost 300 episodes, the ABA Speech Podcast. And I also have a book coming out in July of 2026 called Say It With Me, which I'm so excited about. And my most exciting thing that we do is a membership called the ABA Speech Connection. So we offer CEUs for speech therapists, BCBAs, and PDUs for RBTs, and really just talking all about communication and how to support our students who need it so much.
So you're not busy at all.
No, I mean, yeah. And I can fit in a couple, golf every once in a while and Pilates, but you need self-care.
That's true. That is very true.
Yes.
So you've actually already kind of introduced our topic today, which is this idea of speech and ABA. And, historically, I think to your point, there's been kind of a push and pull with our two fields. And a lot of BCBAs are not speech therapists, and a lot of speech therapists are not BCBAs. And I think sometimes there is a misunderstanding or misalignment of kind of how these two fields can collaborate and work together. So can we start off by talking a little bit about kind of the similarities and how these two fields do actually align in a way that works really well for our clients?
Absolutely. I think we all get into the field because we want to help others. And sometimes, because of our training and because of our work experiences, the way that we go about helping others can be very, very different. But in my mind, it really complements one another. When I was working at the Cleveland Clinic, I met students who I had never seen, students who engaged in aggressive behavior, self-injurious behavior, students who would make themselves throw up when they didn't want to be in a certain situation. I
Right.
saw everything, and I really wanted to reach those learners. And it was really my wanting to learn about ABA and include that into my therapy sessions that I think made me such a better speech therapist, because we as speech therapists do not learn, at least I didn't, and I did go to school a long time ago. I never took a class on autism, and I never
Right.
took a class on how to help kids who are traditionally harder to help with challenging behaviors. And why are these behaviors happening? And the student does not want to engage in my perfectly crafted speech therapy session. So to me, we both come from wanting to help, and we just have different ways of going about it. And the one thing that is so hard, I think, for BCBAs is that we're often tasked with helping to program for communication, which is, within our scope, but we don't get any coursework in usually. We don't usually get any coursework in AAC or augmentative communication. We don't get any, information about how speech sounds are made, but we're programming for a COICS. And so what I try to do in the ABA Speech Connection is bring to life those courses that I think BCBAs really want to learn more about. So we talk about those things a lot and extensively, because just because we didn't learn about it in graduate school does not mean that we're not going to be doing it in our everyday life, just about like school-based positions, right? Which I know that you do a lot of work in that area. So there's just a lot that we learn after we get out of school and we get into the field. And so I think in my mind, it really complements each other. But there's a lot of misinformation online. And so I think we have different ideas about what speech therapy is, and we have different ideas about what ABA really is until we get into it and we meet a speech therapist or BCBA and we're like, oh, that's exciting and transformative.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the fields complement each other really well. And so I am not a speech therapist, but I am a BCBA, but I've worked with some amazing speech pathologists over my life. And when you work with a really good speech pathologist, there's so many amazing things that you can do. And you're right. Like, I didn't take courses on how do you form an L sound,
Right.
or how do you make that R sound, or when should you be making some of these sounds?
Right.
One of the things early in my career is that I learned that sometimes kids aren't developmentally ready to be making some of the sounds that we're trying to teach them how to make. And then that frustrates our speech pathologist colleagues because we're working on things that are not developmentally appropriate, and some of those pieces that come out. But I agree with you. I think together we can be a lot stronger because I think we bring different but complementary knowledge base together.
Yes, absolutely, we do. And I think that it's just being open to those collaboration conversations and being willing to compromise. There's an article by Dr. Matthew Broadhead. I really love Dr. Broadhead. He's just a friend of mine. He actually really liked this Instagram post I made the other day. It was about being in IEP meetings. I make a lot of IEP content because I was school-based for most of my
Right.
career. But he's just like so friendly and kind, but he's so smart and he's done so much research. But he has an article that talks all about how we can compromise sometimes and put things into behavioral principles. And so I think that sometimes we as speech therapists and BCBAs, when we compromise, we feel like we're not being true to the profession that we're in. And so I see that a lot. And I always tell people when I talk about collaboration or I do an ethics talk, I share all the research and I talk about my clinical experiences and now the experience of all the connection members because I do consults with everybody. But I say the decisions you make for your learners are in your own clinical environments or your own school classrooms. You're not going to share this and blast this on Instagram. Like, just do what is right that you were trained to do. And please don't worry about the opinions of others if you're being true to our ethical code and our test content outline or whatever we're calling it these days. But, I just think that we get so worried that if we compromise on something that we're not being a true BCBA. And that couldn't be farther from the truth, especially for school-based BCBAs, because you're going to meet so many people who don't really even know what ABA is.
Well, and sometimes I think it's a language thing, right? Like I think we have terms for things that other people don't use and don't
Correct.
know. But I think other fields have the same thing, right? So when speech therapists are talking about articulation and we're talking about mands and obviously those aren't the same thing, but we have our own terminology for things, as do other fields. And then when we try to bring that together, I think sometimes what I've observed is people dig their heels in because of that language barrier, because we don't take the time to fully understand the perspective of the other discipline.
Yes, absolutely. And I think too, when you are come across people who seem biased against ABA, I think asking people, what is your experience with ABA is really powerful. I just read this book more for the business part of my life. It's called The Coaching Habit. But
Mhm.
to me, it kind of seems like motivational interviewing. I don't know much about that, but I'm friends with Dr. Monica Gilbert. I was just on her podcast. And it's this idea of like asking open ended questions, my understanding, and listening to the answers and having active listening. And I'm like, that seems like a really good question because you don't know if people are consuming a lot of anti ABA information on social media. And I hate to say it, but there's a lot to choose from. And so if you get on that part of the algorithm of whatever you're on, TikTok, Instagram is mostly where I see it, or Facebook, you just don't know what people are consuming. And, we had a really cool person come on, Rachel Terrell. She's a speech therapist in Texas. And she was, very kind of anti ABA. And she had a family friend that got diagnosed, an autism diagnosis, the child did. And the family friend said, hey, we're going to start ABA. And she was like, you are? And she was like, very disappointed. And they were like, can you please come to the clinic and see it? And so Rachel went and she visited and she was like, oh, this is ABA. It was different than what she had in her mind about what
Right.
ABA is. And now she has a really thriving business in Texas where a lot of the speech therapists, herself included, go into ABA centers and provide speech therapy and they collaborate. And I think, wow, how powerful to share her story because she was brave enough to share it and say, you know what, I thought this. Now, she may not do everything like I would as a duly certified
Of
person.
course.
She's into Gestalt language processing, and that's fine. We pick and choose, right? We're going to compromise on some things, but I think what great she is doing by sharing her story and then also going in and having a team going into ABA centers to provide speech therapy. I just think that is really, really powerful.
So for our school-based folks who are like, I really wish I could collaborate with a speech therapist more. I'm not really sure how to start that collaboration. What's some advice that you might give them?
I think that if you're going to be on a campus, trying to contact the speech therapist before you're going to be there and say, hey, I'm going to be at this campus today, on this date. Would you have any time to just catch up and say hi and to meet? I think just starting the open communication like that, speech therapists have really packed schedules and they provide a lot of
Yes.
direct instructions. So it's hard to really talk to them, but maybe they're going to be in a classroom that you're going to be in, and maybe they're doing a push-in group lesson or something. So I think being kind and cognizant of what their schedule is and letting them know ahead of time that you're going to be on a campus would be really helpful. And do they have time to chat? And that is honestly where I would start it. Just build rapport and know who's on the team and try to build a relationship that way. Start really small.
Yeah, and I would add to that, I think honoring their expertise and their professionalism, right? Like one of the things that I have seen people do is come in and be like, "Well, I'm the BCBA, so I know everything," which I
Yeah.
don't know that people try to do that, but it does come off that way sometimes.
Yeah.
And when you can come into a team, any team, but especially I've found this with speech pathologists and acknowledge like you are an expert in communication.
Hmm.
I have expertise in instruction, I have expertise in behavior, I have expertise in, the science of behavior, but I am not an expert in communication necessarily.
Hmm.
And so how can we use our complementary skills to benefit the student? What do you think we should be working on? How would you approach this? And then explaining, well, that sounds really good. What if we thought about it like this? Or what if we added this? Or, those kinds of things I think are really important.
Yes, absolutely. I think knowing what somebody's expertise is, and I think just building that rapport. I think, for some speech therapists, they're going to be so excited to meet you because they have a kid who is trying to escape their therapy sessions, or every time they go into the classroom, the kid's on the iPad and then they say time for speech, and we know that's not going to go well. So they can definitely see you as an ally in that way. And some are just going to be, I know people in the connection who say, I've reached out to the private speech therapist and they haven't got back to me, have not received an email back. So depending on the speech therapist, just opening up the lines of communication, I think. And I've worked in the schools for over 20 years. I think sometimes you meet people and you're like, okay, this is great. This person's my ally. We're going to collaborate. We're going to do groups together. It's going to be awesome. And then other people, you're like, oh, I don't know if they like me. I think they already have some thoughts about me. So for that person, I try to give them a quick win, whatever that means, asking those open-ended questions, how are your therapy sessions going? If I can be a support, let me know, and just kind of leaving it at that. I know school-based BCBAs are extremely busy. I worked in my hometown district here just to be closer to my kids 2 days a week for the past 2 years. And our school-based BCBA was really, really busy in a small rural district in Ohio. They ended up hiring a whole other person. So I know that your time is extremely valuable too, and you might want to get a lot done when you're there on campus, but I would just try to start with small increments and trying to get a quick win to help the speech therapist, to show them that you're valuable. Obviously you're valuable, but it just goes back to using ABA in those, work relationships as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think your point is really important. It's not just that we use ABA with kids, right? The science of behavior works on everybody. Right. And so how do you set yourself up as a reinforcer? And that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think I had a colleague, I don't know if it was Sasha Long, the autism helper. It was like, be the cookie or something. It was something like that. It was like, be the reinforcer, so that when people see you, like SPED directors, I used to want to be a SPED director. I have the licensure. I've had administrative roles before, but every time somebody sees a SPED director, they're like, oh, they're in the building. Why? What's going on? What meeting is taking place? Right? You don't want to be that. You want to be the reinforcer, so that people see you like, oh, good. I wanted to ask you this question, because you want to be the problem solver. So it just, for some people, that's going to take longer, right?
Well, it's a perception issue, right? Like I worked in central office for a long time, and there was always a perception of, oh, central office is here.
Yes.
And it took me a little while to help people understand, like, I'm here for a lot of reasons.
Right.
And sometimes it's just to see how things are going.
Right.
Because when you put that, to your point, when you put that work in up front, it pays dividends on the back end.
Absolutely. And that's when I was a school-based SLP, that's what I always tried to do. Like I would email every single parent, which took me a lot of time because your caseloads are so large, but I just wanted to say, hey, I'm going to be the speech therapist this year. And I would walk around to every single teacher in person and talk to them as well, because that takes a lot of time at first, but honestly, it's better to talk to somebody before there's a problem and you need to talk to them about something that's not going well. And when you work in the schools and with humans in general, there's always going to be problems. So I just try to put that work in up front, thinking about gearing up for, the new school year or whatever it is.
So as a speech pathologist, what are some things that you wish school-based BCBAs knew?
Yeah, I mean, I wish they knew that speech therapists, going back to the schedule and how much we have to do. There's just so much that is asked of us, because if you start to talk about the kids that are on IEPs, potentially programming devices, if you're working in a district where there's contentious parents, that might be, okay, we're going to have the IEP meeting, but that really is an iceberg of like, we're going to have a staffing to meet about the IEP meeting. We're going to send the draft home. The outside team is going to give us all this red penned comments, and then we have to implement them. So there's a lot that goes into that. And if they're helping out with MTSS, I think having an idea of what the speech therapist caseload is too is different. Every district does that different. There might be a speech therapist who just works with the kids who are in autism classrooms or whatever we want to say. And that might look different than a speech therapist who is serving lots of different people and going to different schools. So that can be hard too, the traveling piece. And I think that the one thing, I have this talk called Silos to Synergy in the ABA Speech Connection. It's a CEU talk. And I think that's part of the problem too, is we don't know, how do you become a speech therapist? What do you learn about? Well, speech therapists learn so much about medical speech therapy. Right. What happens when you have a swallowing disorder or you have dementia as you get older, if you've had a stroke. And our field is so broad that a lot of times speech therapists don't take an autism course. They don't take courses in behavior. So they really don't come to the schools always with this skill set of, oh, I know how to help that kid who is running off the playground and is who is an elopement risk. Our field is really, really broad. And so I think that BCBAs need to know that we learn so much in graduate school that a lot of times speech therapists are really passionate about helping autistic learners, but they got that way because they took roles or they took training that helped them feel really confident in that area. And that we all do not learn all those things. So I think that's really important. Even with AAC, like that's a big thing we talk about all the time at ABA Speech, because I took one AAC course. I had a great education, but that course was bad. And when I got into the field, I always joke, but I was scared of AAC devices because I had no idea about the LAMP vocabulary, why the motor plan was important. And it just really intimidated me as a speech therapist, who's somebody who's supposed to know what they're doing. And so now, even now, 20 plus years, technology is always changing. So I'm always trying to learn more. So never assume that somebody has a certain expertise, because a lot of it has to do with what you've learned after you've become a therapist.
Which is actually really similar to BCBAs, right? Like when we go through our program, we learn everything from autism to geriatrics to gambling addiction to, right? There's this kind of survey of all these different things you could do, but you don't become an expert in one of them. Really, where your expertise comes from in that sense is probably from where you did your supervision. And so if you did your supervision in a school, you might know more about it than if you did your supervision working in homes with children, young children with autism, or if you worked in a clinic or whatever the case may be. And so I think it's kind of a nice reminder that maybe we're a little more similar than we think sometimes.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's what gets tricky for BCBAs in a school too, is to say, well, I don't feel comfortable treating that, because in a school, we're treating everybody and we're
100%.
Supporting everybody. So, I remember when I was in a school, I had a lot of kids who stuttered and I did not feel comfortable treating that. So I talked to my SPED director and we had enough money and I was able to get special training in that particular area. So I know that may not be the case for everybody, but I think really trying to advocate for that as well, because in your state, it might be different, but some places it might just be a single BCBA in a district. And so they don't have anybody to talk to. They just don't have any support. And we really have to advocate and say like, well, I need a mentor, or I need to at least take some CEUs in this particular area, right? And that's what's tricky about being a school-based professional, period.
Absolutely. And we definitely have a lot. We have some districts that have lots and lots of BCBAs, but many of them are one or two. When I started as a school-based BCBA, I was the only one in a very large district because I was the first one they'd ever had. They didn't know what to do with me, kind of thing. But actually, I will admit, I found some speech pathologists to be really great colleagues and peer mentors. And, how are you navigating some of these kinds of things? Like you're traveling to 4 different buildings too. Like, how do you do that? And how do you put your time in? And some of those kinds of things that aren't necessarily the behavioral part, but they're kind of the logistical part of your job.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's important. And we do have those things in common. So talking about those areas of how to make the job more streamlined, I'm always trying to work smarter, not harder. So I think talking to people about that is great, because people usually like to talk about themselves and they like to share what's been helpful for them or what hasn't been.
Absolutely. Well, this has been a really, really great conversation, but is there anything else that you would like to share with our school-based BCBAs about speech and behavior and the whole world together?
Yeah. If anything comes up and you're like, oh, I have a question, or, oh, the speech therapist has been really hard to communicate with, you can always visit me at abaspeech.org and ask me a question, or visit me on LinkedIn or Instagram. That's really where I handle all my DMs myself. So I like to be a source of support for people, and I'm more than happy to help out.
Well, thank you so much, Rose, for being with me today. I really appreciate your time and you sharing your expertise.
Thanks for having me.
And to our audience, we will see you on our next episode.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Behavior Education Connection. Join us next time for another great conversation about behavior analysis in the schools. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on an episode. Sending out a special thanks to the Virginia Department of Education for supporting our work. We look forward to connecting with you all again soon.